Many weeks ago, a child, grade 2 student, had said to their mother, "Why does Jesus become bread? Why can't he become candy?" And I knew I'd get that response. I know you might chuckle at this, but I took up the question because every question, if it's an honest question, is not, I tell the kids it's not a stupid question, but it's a good question if it's an honest question. And I felt this was an honest question from a grade 2 student. Now, if Ms. Natola asked me this, I would probably respond differently. But she wouldn't ask me that question. So I took this up, and I will use it to launch into sermon on First Holy Communion. So, why does Jesus become bread, become bread and not candy? Or why does he use bread and not candy? If all you had in the house was candy and bread, that's all you had to eat, which of these would you choose? Oh, you know the answer. You're no fun. Grade 2s, you're supposed to say, I would choose the candy. I know. Okay, you got it right. That was my fault. I primed them wrong. Well, there's an inclination on our part. Of course, maybe we would choose the candy. And the reason is, of course, because it tastes sweet. Well, let us say that we kept on choosing candy. If the child chose the candy, or the adult wasn't thinking like an adult and chose the candy, and we ate it 3 times a day, probably the tummy would not feel very well very quickly. And the reason is and then if we chose the bread and it was good, healthy bread 3 times a day, the tummy would not feel bad. It would actually be okay. And the reason is because bread is nourishing. Candy is not. Candy tastes good, but it's not nourishing. It does not help us grow. It does not nourish our body. And this is really important for us because Jesus actually is sweet, but much better than that, Jesus nourishes us. He nourishes us. So in the gospel I just read, we are told that after feeding the crowd, Jesus withdrew to the mountain by himself. So he fed the people with what? With bread and fish. If Jesus had fed them with candy after they were so hungry, of course, they would not have been nourished. They would have collapsed on the way home. So Jesus would take bread, something that nourishes us, helps us to grow, helps our bodies to re-energize so that we can do many things for God in this world. He would take bread and actually change it into himself. This is way, way beyond our human intellect, how we could do this. But Jesus can do it because he's not just human. Jesus is God. And God is capable of doing this. Even then, we have to accept this on faith. Every Catholic knows this or should know this. Although it is not contrary to reason, it supersedes reason. And so we can only accept this by faith. And Jesus would make this very clear at the end of John chapter 6. Jesus would do something that no one else in the whole universe could do, precisely because he's the creator of the universe. He made the whole universe. Jesus would take bread, not candy, and tell people that in Mass, now he's not doing it in this gospel, but he will do this, as recorded in the gospel, that in the Mass, when the priest says the special words, what's the special words that the priest says? What are they called? Grade 2s, you know this. Got to put your hand up, though. Yes. Sorry, I didn't hear. There's one word. It's one word. Starts with a C. Consecration, that's correct. At the consecration. And so they can memorize these words, and it's actually up to us as adults, because if you ask them what consecration meant, they even know the word transubstantiation. And it's good that they memorize it, but it's our task and our responsibility as adults to help them as they grow to go deeper into what that actually means. but it's good that they actually get the right word. They get the accurate description of it. So at consecration, Jesus would become present to us. Even though bread would still look like bread, it would no longer be bread, but Jesus himself. This helps us understand that we need something more than bread, simply more than bread to nourish our bodies. We need Jesus to nourish our soul, our mind, our body, our heart. We need Jesus to nourish us. We need Jesus to help us live and be close to God his Father and the Holy Spirit. For these and many other reasons, Jesus chose bread and not candy. He said, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall not hunger. He who believes in me shall not thirst. I will satisfy, and I'm the only one who can satisfy the desires, the longings, the deep desires of your heart. And this, Jesus also taught us, is the bread that comes down from heaven. It's him who comes down from heaven so that everyone who eats of it shall not die. People have believed this wonderful truth all through the millennia, for over 2,000 years. And many have died for this Catholic belief, that Jesus is present under the form of bread and wine. Still looks like, tastes like, and so on, bread and wine, but it's not bread and wine after the words of consecration. They've died for this belief that only he can nourish us through Holy Communion in the Mass celebrated by a Catholic priest. Not because the priest is better than anybody, he's not. But he's an instrument chosen by God. It's like, are parents any better than their children? No, they're not. The dignity before God is the same. But parents are tasked with raising those wonderful, innocent souls and preparing them for the beatific vision, for the union with the Creator for all eternity, helping them to be good citizens in this world, but with the end in mind. Begin with the end in mind. Rule number 2, Stephen Covey. Begin with the end in mind. One of my personal heroes, I've never met her, and I will not meet her in this life. I pray that I can meet her in heaven. But we know her name. She has been given, her name is Pei, P-E-I. This hero of mine influenced a Catholic bishop, one of the greatest preachers, Catholic preachers of the last century. She influenced him to pray 1 hour every day in the presence of Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, in the tabernacle. The Archbishop was asked who influenced him to do a holy hour in front of the tabernacle. The interviewer asked if it was a pope, a cardinal, a bishop. All the answers were no. It was, the Archbishop stated, an 11-year-old girl. An 11-year-old girl. He told the story, and I can never tell this enough times because it's so profound, it's so encouraging, and it's so challenging for us as adults. In a village in a Catholic church in China, Shanghai, Pei, P-E-I, pronounced pay, like pay out, the communists had taken over the country under Mao. Communist guards put the priest in this parish under house arrest, had broken into the church, they had broken into the tabernacle and threw the hosts all over the floor. The priest knew the exact number of hosts in the Saboria, the container that holds the hosts, 32. Unbeknownst to the guards, a young girl had seen all of this. Pei, 11-year-old girl. This young girl took it upon herself to sneak into the church, past the guard while he was sleeping. Every night she did this and made a holy hour to make up for the hatred of the guards. 11-year-old girl. I'll keep saying it because it's astounding. After the hour, she would go into the sanctuary and kneel down on the floor, all fours, and with her tongue, she would take one of the hosts. Because in those days, any older Catholic here knows it was forbidden for the layperson to touch the host. So this young child was taught properly. The imprisoned, the last night, she did this for 32 nights. The imprisoned priest saw all of this. On the last night, after she had consumed the 32nd host, she accidentally made a noise. The guard woke up and beat her to death. 11-year-old girl. The priest saw all of this and he was beside himself, but there was nothing he could do about it except tell the story. How important it is that we tell stories like this that are true. When Archbishop Sheen heard about this, he promised God that he would make a holy hour in front of the tabernacle for the rest of his life. He said that if a young girl could give such witness with her life to the world concerning the real and wonderful presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, then he could spend 1 hour every day in the presence of the Eucharistic Lord. Well, Archbishop Sheen influenced me when I was in the seminary. I listened to his tape. He was dead by then. But I listened to his tapes, his talks on cassette tape to show you how old I am. And I heard his talk on the Holy Hour, and it inspired me. It actually fired me up to do this. You know, I was 23. And young people, they actually are open to being challenged. They have, you know, as Jordan Peterson puts it, not in a sarcastic way, he said, we have a Messiah complex. In other words, we want to do great things. We want to be challenged. We want to go out and charge the world, as it were, and, you know, do our best. And I heard this talk and I thought, yeah, I want to do that. So I owe my holy hour to this little Chinese girl of 11 years of age. And I pray that God will grant me the gift one day of meeting her in heaven. This is the book about her life. Pei, 32 days. Young girl. It's a great story to buy and read to your kids. Read to your kids. Kids love stories being read to them. This is a wonderful story. In our day, closer to us, a young boy was so in love with Jesus in the Eucharist and at Mass that after he received his first Holy Communion, at 7 years of age, he never missed going to daily Mass. 7 years of age. Through the working of a priest, his mother says she met through her classes. Carlo was able to receive his first Holy Communion at just 7 years old, because in many places it was still at 12. Maybe there are older Italians here who can relate to that. After which he never missed daily Mass, even while their family traveled. Even while a 7-year-old boy remembering this, having presence of mind, to not want to miss daily Mass when on their own vacation. Stunning. Carlo's love for the Eucharist formed his mother's own devotion to the sacrament. The source of sanctity of Carlo was the Holy Eucharist. He used to say, the Eucharist is my highway to heaven. It's my highway. It's almost incomprehensible to me that a boy, this is like 3, 4, 5, 6 times my faith. 7-year-old boy. Father Nicola Gori, the postulator of Acutis' cause for sainthood, he's now blessed, said that Carlo loved God in such a way that invited others, especially those closest to him, to share in the Eucharistic feast. Think about this. He managed to drag his relatives. A 7-year-old boy managed to drag his relatives, his parents, to Mass every day. He just wouldn't stop asking. And it was like parents usually, they want to do a whole lot for their kids. It was not the other way around. They didn't have to drag him, he dragged them. It's not his parents bringing a little boy to Mass, but it was he who managed to get himself to Mass and convince others to receive communion daily. Before Carlo, Antonia, his mother, said that she went to Mass only for her first communion, confirmation, and marriage. That's all, that's the typical, hatched, matched, and dispatched type of thing. Catholics, some are familiar with this expression. So she basically said, I was in that category, Holy Communion, confirmation, and marriage. Perhaps I would have been carried in for my funeral. But by Carlo's exemplary love for the Eucharist, I started to go to Mass again, Antonia said. And this was actually because of Carlo. Carlo was, for me, a sort of little savior. She writes about this in this beautiful book just newly published called My Son Carlo. Carlo Acutis through the eyes of his mother. I keep saying it, a 7-year-old boy There's so much more to this young boy. At that age, I was mindless. He's such an example. He makes me want to rise up and do more. What occurs today is something truly wonderful. It's a day of joy, of celebration, and happiness. But it is only a continuation of a long and very important journey that will need constancy, example, fidelity, and recovery. For example, when you miss Mass, if that happens, and a laser focus on where we are going. Where we are going. Rule number 3 of Stephen Covey is first things first. Rule number 2 is begin with the end in mind. We want to get to heaven. We got to have first things first. Where we are going, where we really where we want to go, and where we want our children to be at the end of their life. What, or more importantly, who do you want to nourish your children? Because the world is just waiting to suck them right in. You all know this. It's just waiting to suck them in. But Jesus wants to nourish them, but he needs your permission. All of you moms and dads, think about a little Chinese girl in Carlo Acutis. These young children who were taught properly and fell in love with Jesus in the Holy Eucharist serve to inspire us, to encourage us, to prompt us to give of ourselves. They should motivate us to ask Jesus to help us love him more and more and better and more consistently. So a takeaway. Parents, resolve to take your children to Mass every Sunday, beginning today, tomorrow, or tonight. If you make this a priority, then it will be just that. It will be a priority around which other things will be sort of planned, or other things will fall into place. Jesus did promise, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all these other things shall be added unto you as well. But if you don't give me a chance, he's saying, it's not going to happen. It's going to be confusing. It's going to be other things getting in the way. But seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, first things first. They will understand when we do this that Jesus is just that. He's a priority. And they will bless you. I promise you this, and I swear an oath. They will bless you when they get older. They will bless you. They may even fall away, but the example will help them spring back. The grace of the Holy Spirit will help them spring back. To the children, I also give you a challenge as well. Very simple. It's much simpler than the one I gave to your parents. Tell Jesus in the Holy Eucharist that you love him very much. You want to love him like Pei and Carlo, these two young children. You want to love him like Pei and Carlo. And you want his help to love him more and more each day. Never stop telling Jesus you love him. I love you. I know I don't love you enough, but I love you. And I want to love you more. I want to love you deeper. I want to love you more consistently. Two children speak to us from far off China and from far off Italy. Jesus awaits us in the Eucharist, the bread of life, to nourish our heart, our mind, our body, and our soul, to help us live a good life in this world. And I know moms and dads want so much to have their children live a good life, to really flourish and to experience the fullness of what it means to be human. And only Jesus can really deliver the goods on this desire, and then, God willing, to be in heaven. That he is present and waiting for us each Sunday when we are called to gather. Jesus is here to nourish us.